Welcome back, guys and gals, to the Feed Me Pixels review and recommendation series. I'm your host today, Larry the Chupacabra, and we're going to be checking out the real-time strategy game Grey Goo, developed by Petroglyph Studios and published by Greybox. It's available on Steam for around $50, and it takes us careening through space to a future region of the Milky Way galaxy, fighting it out between the hyper-advanced humans, the unknown but rambunctious race known as the Beta, and of course every scientific, robotic researcher's end nightmare, the Goo itself, which is a sentient form of nanotechnology which has gone rampant and is trying to take over its region of the galaxy for some unknown purpose and to fight some strange, mysterious foe. The gameplay of Grey Goo, then, is pretty standard for any RTS. You've got a base, you've got a conveniently placed geyser of the in-game building material known only as the Catalyst, and in its ever-depleting form, you need to use it to craft your various military buildings, crafting stations, weapons of terrifying mass destruction, and roam out into the wilds of an alien world in order to hunt down your enemy before they murder you and end the game. Now, the difference between Grey Goo and, say, your more well-known RTS games like StarCraft, Command & Conquer Generals, Supreme Commander, is that Grey Goo emphasizes slowed-down gameplay and large-scale, broad tactics as opposed to a zillion micromanaged actions in a slew of a bajillion different units. This sort of slowed down gameplay mechanic or intentional pacing of combat is handled in a couple of different ways. The first way is everything in the game has a very specific time that it takes to craft, to build, to upgrade, and to alter pretty much every unit, structure, and bit of research. And this gives you a lot of time where you've the ability to sit down and to think about what exactly your next move is going to be. Do you need more units with a little bit of extra area of effect damage? Do you maybe need some more aerial units to help scout out enemy movements? Or maybe you just need a sneaky stealth force to sneak into the side of the base where it's poorly defended, so that when your main force moves up to the front gates and assaults them, they can sneak in and destroy the primary command center, or the enemy's source of income, the ever-elusive and delicious Catalyst. The other way that they try to improve your ability to make split-moment decisions in the game is by intentionally limiting the number of units, buildings, and resources and tech upgrades that you really have to think about. There's only, I think, about, 7 different types of units, about 3 different types of buildings, and that's about all you really have to worry about. So all you have to do is say, you know what? The enemy has got a whole boatload of those annoying little critters that they can make very easily and cheaply, that are sort of overwhelming my soldiers. Perhaps if I built a couple more artillery units and hid them in this brush over here, then I could get the upper hand in the next conflict or the next skirmish when I run into the Goo or perhaps the Beta aliens. And these sorts of changes in overall gameplay ideology and mechanics are definitely going to be something that's a lot more approachable for newer players to the genre, and for those who are a bit more veteran players to RTS games, you'll find this to be a very nice and sort of laid-back, relaxing alternative to games like StarCraft 2, where you can kind of kick back at the end of the day. I mean, it's been a long, kind of stressful day, you're a bit brain drained, and you can just sit back and play an RTS game that doesn't really require you to make 1,000 split-second decisions every time there's a major engagement of your forces. There's smaller armies that you'll end up making in Grey Goo, there's smaller skirmishes, and there's just a lot less that you have to worry about. There's only one resource pool, there's only one type of building that can craft everything, or actually two, depending on what race you choose. So it's a very dumbed down and very kind of relaxingly paced alternative to the more classical games. The story. What is the story like in Grey Goo? Well, funny enough, it follows along with the really old sci-fi trope of, well, Grey Goo, which is that scientists theorized that eventually robots would get so small and so super intelligent that they would form a giant neural network of tiny microscopic machines and slowly replicate and envelop the world, sucking up all of its resources and either absorbing or murdering most of its inhabitants. Likewise, Grey Goo focuses around a common enemy, or what is supposed to be a common enemy, of a rogue AI that has somehow broken with its original exploration programming and started to murder things, absorb all of the in-game crafting material or catalyst that it could get its little microscopic grubby hands on in order to accomplish some sort of unknown goal. And that's about all that's alluded to in the game. You don't really get to learn a whole heck of a lot about any of the races in the game. They allude to a very in-depth universe with a lot of really fancy background information and all of these fancy reasons why all of the characters are where they are, but they never really explain it in any way that sort of ties the entire universe together. And for $50, they really leave you hanging on the edge there. So the campaign mode and the story, it's really just about keeping you vaguely interested in what's going on in the campaign as you learn all of the gameplay mechanics so that you can be shuttled off to the multiplayer side of the game and get to the real action where you fight other players, learning the new meta and all of the different tactics that'll carry you through the game. And the campaign provides you with about 15 missions, which sounds like a lot, especially in a game that's very slowed down. Each of the missions will probably take you 30 to 45 minutes to complete as you learn the mechanics. However, each of the missions is sort of on the basic side. They barely give you enough time to hop into the game and start making units, then you have to immediately rush to the nearest objective and defend or capture it before it gets destroyed. So, I don't know, the campaign kind of left me a little bit wanting, so it's clear that they really intend to kind of just shuttle you along, keep you vaguely interested, until they can move you into the multiplayer segment of the game. Which is odd, because it feels like Grey Goo kind of sits in a unique little niche. It's trying to appeal to the more hardcore RTS crowd by offering them a simplified version that's a little bit slower than most RTSs, and they also seem like they're trying to appeal to people who just can't quite get into real-time strategy games because they're too fast and it's really hard to find an entry-level position in order to really learn it, love it, and play it. But they're really just kind of focused on the hardcore player base who probably just want to move on and play more StarCraft. So, what are the audio and the visuals like in Grey Goo? Well, if there's one thing that you can say about Grey Goo is it is a very beautiful and well-designed game from a visuals, graphics, and audio standpoint. All of the different units and the buildings and the environments, they're all hand-modeled and extremely detailed, and I mean you can zoom in there and they don't degrade even at the smallest levels, so long as you've got the game at about medium or high quality. And that's pretty cool. I mean, there's one thing I always enjoyed was jumping in there, zooming really far in there, and seeing the individual units and how they react and how they behave and like what they're doing, because I just wasn't quite getting that lore aspect from the story or any of the different campaign information. Likewise, they've got a lot of unique sounds. Each unit has got their own voice actors, they've got their own custom sounds, so that no matter what unit you're clicking on, you can tell exactly which one they are just by the sound that they make. You don't even have to look, and that's great, especially when you start to manage large numbers of units. It can be really hard to delineate if you don't have some of those nice little sounds in there to help you out. Similarly, during the story mode, one of the few things that really helps drive you through the campaign are all of the really well-made cinematic modes. Like, they're just absolutely gorgeous. All of the characters are well-modeled and well-animated, and that's about the only thing that drove me personally through the story, and they did a wonderful job with that. Does it fall short a little bit? Yeah, there are a few sounds in there that seem kind of cheap or reused, or like they just didn't have enough time or budget near the end to kind of polish everything. But on the whole, 2/3 of the sound and most of the visuals are absolutely gorgeous, all the way down to the most basic levels. So with that information, to wrap up the Feed Me Pixels review of Grey Goo, it's a very good, very simple, dumbed down real-time strategy game that can give you a relaxing, slower alternative to, say, StarCraft 2, Supreme Commander, but it doesn't really have the depth of story or the intrigue that will really draw the players into a unique universe. It's really designed for players who really want to get into real-time strategy games that just can't quite get there, and also players who are veterans but just don't really want to mess around with a bajillion micromanaged clicks dealing with hundreds of units and hundreds of buildings. It's simplified, but it doesn't really break the bank as far as originality or in the story department, but it's beautiful, it plays pretty well, and if you're looking for a simple strategy game, this would be for you. So overall, I recommend it, but it might not be for people who really need that story in there and a lot of depth. So if you've enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and hey, if you like free stuff and you want to win your own copy of Grey Goo to check it out for yourself, see the description for a link for your chance to enter and win, and that's a $50 value. I mean, what's not to love? So, I've been your host, Larry the Chupacabra. Hope you enjoyed my review today of Grey Goo. If you're interested in more content from me or some of the other crazy zany antics that I get up to, check the description of the video for a link to my own channel, where I do things like Let's Plays, First Looks, my own reviews, and also the occasional interview with developers. So until next time, have a good one everybody, and toodaloo!